So welcome to my next video where now I'm going over the creditors and the bankruptcy petition. Now the last one was Schedule D, and I'll make reference to Schedule D, which is secured creditors. But here we're focusing on unsecured debt. And I've said before in prior videos, I'm not going to necessarily go over filling out the areas. For example, you see here, it's just asking basic information, name of the creditors, etc. I'm going to point out other things that you're not going to find typically in a book or in a video, and things that I've learned over the years, mistakes that are made. So we first start off with we're dealing with unsecured creditors. Now, this is important. If you're still in possession of the car, or you're still in possession of the home that you're going to let to go into foreclosure, then it's not an unsecured creditor. It belongs in Schedule D, which is secured debt. And then you'll put in there that you'll surrender that asset. And then you're not going to include it as an exemption on Schedule C, which I've gone over already. So you're only putting debts that are actually unsecured as of today. The fact that the foreclosure will go through in a month or two and the car repo in a week or two, that's fine. You don't need to change the petition again to say, okay, now that debt is now unsecured. Just the fact that you put on there that it was a secured debt and you're surrendering that asset, that's fine. If there's any assets, any non-exempt equity, the trustee will take it and sell it to pay off the creditors. If there's nothing there, the trustee wants nothing to do with it. So it'll be the lender's issue, whether it's a foreclosure to get a realtor, sell the house, or get a tow company to pick up the car, sell it at a repo, and that's it. So now let's suppose that it is a secured asset, or was. Let's say the home was sold at foreclosure and the home was sold for $200,000, right? So if the home is sold for $200,000, but you owed $300,000, well, there's $100,000 that's missing, right? That's what they can sue you for. We call that a deficiency. That deficiency would be listed here because you no longer have the asset, will be listed here as an unsecured debt. So keep that in mind. You have to figure out, if you already lost the asset, then that's fine. Now, then it becomes unsecured. Now, as I put here before, this goes back to the issue that I mentioned in the last video regarding exemptions. You have to know what the value of these assets are to know what the exemption amount are. In this case, because we're dealing with unsecured debt, we don't really have to worry about it, right? We just have to say how much is actually owed, and I'll explain priority debt in a second because you can see it right there on the screen. Now, one thing I want to make clear about the debt amount. Sometimes you don't know the debt amount, and that's okay. You can literally just put any number, and don't put down 1 million. You're just going to cause more problems. But if it's 15,200 and you think it's 12 or you think it's 19, that you put that number down, that's not going to affect the bankruptcy at the end of the day. If for some reason you had to convert to a Chapter 13, then sure, the creditors are going to say, well, those amounts are wrong because maybe the creditors are trying to get a bigger piece of the pie when you're paying into your Chapter 13, or if you're paying into a chapter, if there's any non-exempt assets, like, again, you surrender your home, then the creditors can jump in and do what they want. So keep that in mind. Now, this part's a little confusing here because it might make people think that they can wipe out all these debts. Domestic support obligations, that's nothing other than alimony and child support. That's not going to get wiped out in bankruptcy. Taxes, for the most part, there's very limited exceptions, are not going to get wiped out, and neither is a DUI. If there's a DUI, you can wipe out your credit cards and everything else, but any damages caused by the DUI are not going to get wiped out. So keep that in mind. Now, there's a section here, you'll see here, different debtors, if there's a co-borrow, co-signer. I'll get into that into a second. Let me move down here to talk about the other non-priority claims, basically credit cards and things like that. Now, you're going to put you don't have to put the full account number, just the last 4 digits. It's fine. Why? Because they're going through your social security number, so they don't really have to you don't have to really worry about that. But there might be an issue here where you don't have the full account number. Number one, definitely pull your credit from the 3 credit bureaus. I blogged lately. I've been saying for months that there was going to be issues with Social Security and Doge. Turns out, the Department of Government Efficiency Turns out that there is now a whistleblower complaint saying exactly that our private data was uploaded to the cloud, and there's already been incidents of hacking. So I've been advocating now for a long time to do a credit freeze. I'll put that information in the description of this video, but now's probably a good time to do a credit freeze. You can read more about that on my blog. But a credit freeze prevents anybody else from getting your credit. So even though you're doing bankruptcy, you're going to rebuild up your credit anyway. But once you apply for credit, you're done with the bankruptcy, go ahead and freeze your credit to not have to stress this out. Okay. And I'm going to put the link as well to the 3 credit bureaus. But note that TransUnion, one of the credit reporting bureaus, was also hacked. Something like 4 million people are at risk. So that's why I'm advocating now, definitely freeze your credit. But again, you'll get that information there. Now, my concern is here, suppose it's an old debt, Bank of America, whomever, and they've sold that debt a few times over. And realistically, sometimes this debt gets handed over multiple times to different collection agencies. How are you going to handle that? Well, number one, if you know who the debt collection agency is, you would just put that there. You would put ABC Debt Collection Agency. Now, there's going to be certain issues like, well, what's the balance, right? How much do you owe them? Well, you owe them the full amount, let's say 15,000, right? But you also owe Bank of America 15,000. So you're going to double your debt, 30,000? No, because when you do that, part of the problem is if your debt gets inflated and it's just at a certain amount, then the U.S. trustee might get involved and say, why is your unsecured debt so high? They might think there's fraud. But think about it. If you have 5 credit cards and there's, 5 credit agencies, and all of a sudden you double everything, yeah, you might have to look into fraud as a Department of Justice, because you're wondering, how did this person get $80,000, $90,000 in credit cards? So keep that in mind. What we typically put is just say, when it comes to the amount, we just put like notice only. So it's with debt collection agency, notice only. And then you can put 0. It's notice only because they're only sending you notices, right? They're only telling you, hey, we're here to collect. It's not until the case goes to court, then all of a sudden you have to worry about the fact that, you now have this other debt. You'll list that as well. And by the way, in SOFA, getting ahead of ourselves, Statement of Financial Affairs, any lawsuits will be listed there, which is typically the last form that you will complete. Okay, so definitely get the credit bureau information and everything else. Now let's talk about this for a second here. Debtors, co-debtors. You have to list the co-debtors. So doesn't matter if it's an ex-spouse, everybody knows you're keeping the car, it's in the divorce agreement and everything else. You have to include, you have to give them notice. Now, part of the problem with this is understand that if you're wiping out certain debts, just because you file for bankruptcy, that doesn't mean your co-borrower, co-signer gets away with it. They're now going to be responsible for that balance. So keep that in mind. If someone was trying to help you with a car loan and you eventually that car got repossessed, even though you did the bankruptcy, you are wiping out the debt on your end. You're not wiping out the debt on the end of the co-borrower. So the co-borrower is going to have to either pay back that debt, or they're going to have to file for bankruptcy as well, to get rid of that. So keep that in mind. You have to list who are the other people that are attached to this claim. There's a separate schedule that you can do that for. Okay. Now, if it's a married couple, then you don't have to worry about, specifically is this mine or yours. You can just put both of you all the way through, because sometimes it's common for married couples to have different, credit cards. I might have credit card A and my wife doesn't, but she has credit card B, which I'm also not a part of. That's okay. The trustee is not going to worry about that too much either. Okay. Now, let me talk here about student loans. Are you going to wipe out student loans in bankruptcy? No. That is a completely separate process. That is called the adversary process. That is a lawsuit that you have to file separately to deal with that issue. Now, one thing to know about student loans, everything is changing now. We're in a different administration. I will say that they are being a lot more aggressive with garnishments and everything else. So keep that in mind. Now, one thing I have learned is that when it comes to if you're trying to negotiate your student loans and the creditor hasn't been flexible with the payments, then typically when you file for bankruptcy, they become flexible, and they'll tell you, what, we'll come back and visit this issue in 6 months or a year. So sometimes it's helped someone, give some breathing room financially while they're going through this process. But here's something you need to know. Student loans, right? We have to pay them, right? Unless we go through this adversary process. But what about paying them while you're in bankruptcy? Typically, you're not paying your unsecured debt when you're in bankruptcy, right? You're not going to file for bankruptcy and you're still paying on your MasterCard. You can't do that. But student loans are different. But because they're different, sometimes things change. And by that, I mean sometimes you have disposable income. We're not there yet. We're talking about Schedule I and then the expenses, which is Schedule J. Sometimes that disposable income means you're going to have to file for Chapter 13. But if you stop paying your student loans during that time period, sometimes you can just go ahead and start repaying back those student loans to eliminate your disposable income and stay in Chapter 7. So keep that in mind. It's a tool that you can use. You have to pay that debt anyway, so that you're paying it now through a Chapter 7 wouldn't make a difference, and there's really nothing a trustee can do about it because, again, you have to go through the adversary, and the odds of that getting wiped out in a bankruptcy is going to be it's going to be rare. Okay, so this pretty much covers the unsecured debt. What I really want you to focus on is first understand the DSOs, domestic support obligations, that you're not going to be able to get rid of. But one issue that you do have with the DSOs, a lot of times I see with the automatic stay that the court stops those hearings, like this is a child support hearing. They're not supposed to. It's supposed to continue going forward. But all I can say is sometimes I think these judges are not up to date on how bankruptcy should not affect that type of case. But I'll just let you know that if you're on the other side and an ex files for bankruptcy, the case should go on. But I honestly see more often than not that it does not move forward. So do keep that in mind. The important part, like I said at the beginning, was the deficiency judgment. Just keep in mind that you have to, it's simple enough. Do you have the asset or not? If it's the asset that's being surrendered, put it on Schedule D, secure debts. We've gone over that already. Just look at those prior videos and blogs. But if it's an asset that was already taken back from the lender, car or home, now it's unsecured and it becomes a deficiency judgment. One thing, because I did mention duplicating the amounts on the debts. Like I said, if you have Bank of America collection agency, you don't double that debt. You just put, $0 notice only. Keep in mind to be clear that it's a deficiency judgment or balance, and list the address of the home. I say that because imagine if the trustee or say Department of Justice picks up your file coincidentally and they say, wow, this person owes $300,000 in unsecured debt. Is something going to come out of it? You're going to go to jail? Is there any fraud or anything like that? No, of course not. But they will contact you and ask you to put and submit in writing to answer, these questions. So what you end up doing is you end up spending time having to answer this because they don't know what kind of debt it is. They might think it's a personal loan or something like that. And now they really have to dig into this and say, is there fraud? But when you're clear that you put, deficiency balance, meaning the house hasn't, you haven't gotten to judgment yet, or deficiency judgment, meaning there is a judgment already issued by the court on the balance, then just make sure that you put there, that it was tied into this home so that they move on and start looking at the actual credit card debt to make sure that there was no fraud there as well. All right. Any questions or comments about the schedule so far? Feel free to post them in the comment section below. Take care, everyone. Be safe. Feel free to subscribe to my blog, bankruptcy.blog. It's free. You just get an email from me, sometimes regarding issues like this bankruptcy. Sometimes it's other issues such as the economy and bankruptcy related news. So it's a good way to keep up to date with everything that's going on. All right. Take care, everyone, and I'll see you at the next video.